Maves, are there any comments or questions to the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Under reports, our first report is R 2009-01 dealing with playing field fees and reducing direct taxpayer subsidization. Report by Ms. Morrissey. Ms. Morrissey, did you want to give any intro to the report at all?
I'll do very brief. Through you, Councillor Pietrangelo. Council had asked us to focus in on revenue opportunities. So consistent with our strategic plan, we put this report together in concert with the budget. Very quickly, we've looked at 15 other municipalities, and that's just a snippet of the number of municipalities in Ontario that charge for playing fields. We thought it was critical to bring to Council's attention the opportunity for additional revenues that currently in our budget, approximately athletic fields cost about $792,000. That's the equivalent of approximately 1.8% on the tax levy. And currently there's an inconsistency, as I was identified in our strategic plan, between where we charge fees and where we don't. Council recently approved the implementation of fields for the artificial fields. We're estimating approximately $20,000 will be generated this year. We've also noted that cities of our size traditionally could generate between $80,000 and $100,000 on basic field fees for natural fields. So we've put together an implementation plan based on Council's direction of approving the implementation of field fees. We would go forward with implementing field fees for out-of-town residents and adults for 2009 and meet with them. We would outline fees for consideration for our resident and youth organizations to be looked at for spring 2010, our next budget. And then we would also meet with the applicable user groups as part of that process. So that's a brief synopsis of the report. We've also provided you with the draft to be brought back at this time just to anchor the importance of a policy for user fees, again identified in our strategic plan, and the principles under which that's based on for guiding us going forward. I'd pleased to address any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Thompson, Iannoni, and Wing, please.
Yes, thank you. This is always a topic of great interest, and you have always been very familiar with the fact that staff can write any report they want to lead you to the conclusion that they would like, and then we accept that conclusion and we pass the motion, and after we leave the council meeting we hear what the community has to say about it. And I want to refer first of all to the decision that I thought was reasonable a couple of weeks ago with respect to cancellation of hockey times. It made good sense to me that if somebody doesn't show up to an appointment, why wouldn't they have to pay for that appointment? And there was some suggestions that they'd be very lenient with respect to this first year, and I thought it was a good solution. However, the present time I spend a lot of time in the arenas with a grandson playing hockey, and I have to tell you, I was attacked immediately. I went into the arena about this policy, and that the individual who was knowledgeable about the situation, in fact a former employee, indicated that what a stupid policy, and you're only going to lose money. People aren't going to put up with that. They're not going to book in the first place. So I got some eye-opening comments which I was very surprised at, and I was the one that made the motion with respect to that. And then the next event that I attended, I was again attacked about why are you people making us give credit cards ahead of time? So we could never afford that, and this is from the minor hockey people. So hopefully in any of these things, and my suggestion is, I don't want to hear about any of them. Go out and talk to the user groups, get a signed document of agreement like was done with the artificial turf at the at Cato Road, Girls Home for Soccer. Get everybody in agreement with it, and then bring it back to council, rather than us having to read a report, make a decision, and then going out and hearing what everybody has to say about it. You know, one of the most interesting commercials I've seen on TV in the last little while is a young boy coming into a restaurant owner, and he was about 11 or 12 years old, and asking about a job, and the owner says, well, I think we were looking for somebody older. Shouldn't you be out playing hockey and sports? And he says, well, that's what I'm trying to do. So there are people out there who are suffering, and thank goodness we have people like Bob Gale who are willing to set up a fund to assist young people. But we have probably the worst economic times that we have in this community. And to start suggesting that, and I know we're not talking about 09, we're talking about 10, and I'm sure we're going to hear a lot of debate and discussion before we get to that point where we ever discuss funding or charging for some of the fields that have been free all the way along. And you get the people who come to you and say, you know, I pay my taxes. What services do I get? Every time I turned around, there's another user fee, and I thought I was paying my taxes to the city, which would include and provide that service for me. So I got some very strong feelings about this situation, and if we're going to do this, it is only going to be, in my opinion, with my support, if we have exhaustive discussions with the user groups and they come back and they agree to what we're suggesting. Otherwise, I think that we're putting another hardship on the young people in our community. Adults shouldn't have any trouble paying. I don't have a problem with that. But when we get in, charging for fields, in my opinion, is, in spite of the fact that it might have a little bit of a bearing on the budget for others in the community. So I think we've got a long way to go with this.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Iannone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I was going to make a motion to move the recommendation. Never been a huge proponent of this, but I think at this point in this economy, we're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't. I think what changed my mind was attachment 1, when it showed in the Niagara region we are the only community not charging user fees, and I think we probably missed the boat not starting years ago when it first came to us, and we were dead fast on taking that to the residents and saying we weren't going to turn another cost over to them, but we wouldn't have to implement as quickly as we do now if we were phasing it in, in small amounts over time. The rest of the communities can't be wrong. I was shocked out of 16 listed here, we were the only ones not doing it. And I think that it's been quoted often that we have to make difficult decisions in this difficult time right now. And while I hate to do it, it brings in revenue and it cuts down costs for the city. And quite frankly, that's what we need to do right now. So I'll put a motion on the floor and I'll move the recommendation.
Okay, motion moved by Councillor Iannone, seconded by Councillor Wing. I have Councillor Wing that wishes to speak.
Yes, you know, people don't like paying user fees, but they don't like paying taxes either, and it's either one or the other. And what impressed me when I was reading this report was particularly the information on page 2 really rang about true to the principles of user pay and fairness. Fairness in that we're looking at having user fees applying equally to our indoor and outdoor facilities, and user pay in that the prime beneficiaries are arguably the exclusive users of the fields are going to be contributing to the cost of the recreational service that they're enjoying. It's user pay and fairness. And I was already getting convinced, and then when I got to the attachment that Councillor Iannone just spoke about, when we were the lone no in a sea of yeses, that was what finally convinced me that this is absolutely the way we have to go. I know the users aren't going to like it, but they're not going to like high taxes either, and we've got to generate the revenues somehow. So to me, let's just do it the fairest and most equitable way.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mays, please.
Yes, Chairman. I'm just looking at this, and the implementation plan says that this is only going to be studied in their recommendations, so we can veto certain items on this. It's not etched in stone. Nothing is yet, and the recommendations are going to come forward. So nothing is really, it's just a suggestion at this point. Is that correct?
I'll ask Ms. Morrissey to answer that, please.
Through the chair, what we would be, through the implementation plan, is we would bring back to council by the end of February the recommended fees to implement in phase 1. That would be for out-of-town users, commercial users, and adult users. And then on addition to that, we would then come back before June of 2009 to give you the recommended fees for all other users for implementation in spring of 2010. So correct, if you weren't content or agree to those fees, then certainly council's prerogative is not to approve them.
Certainly I agree with some of those, especially the out-of-towner fees. I don't see any reason why anybody from out of town should be using our fields for free. So as I say, as these things come up and we have a chance to review them, certainly my compassion is the same as Councillor Thompson's. We have to look after our children and of course the adults and some of the out-of-towners. I can see where we possibly can make an assessment there, especially the out-of-towners. Thank you.
Okay, do I have any other council member that wishes to make a comment? If not, there is a motion on the floor to approve the recommendation in the report. I'll call the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Thompson is opposed. Moving on, we have our first presentation. It'll be on the capital budget. I'll ask Mr. Harrison to take the podium, please.
Good evening, Council and Mr. Chairman. Tonight, what we're going to be going over is the capital budget workshop, and we had done two others of these, one regarding PSAB and one regarding development charges, and this is the third one, and basically it's just an information session to get you prepared, provide you with some reminder information on what we did with the capital budget last year, and to be informal and to receive some direction from Council as to how we'd like to move ahead. We're going to be covering 6 areas. Just a quick definition of what the capital budget entails. Talk a bit about the design of the capital budget. We're going to be talking about the categories, and the prioritization method. If you recall, those were new to last year's methodology. Talk quickly about some funding sources, and then lastly, we'll be going over the proposed timing of the capital budget. Firstly, what is a capital budget? A capital budget is a multiple-year plan of capital investments. We do it over a 5-year model, so it would be 2009 to 2013. It outlines the annual expenditures that will be entailed in the entire program, and also the funding sources that we'll be utilizing to fund those expenses. And it consists of 3 items. Basically, it'd be a multi-year program. An example of that would be asphalt paving, where we have multiple years. It's an annual program. It's funded from the capital program. We'd have multiple year projects, so a large project that wasn't being able to be completed in 1 year, like the arena project, for instance, would be carried forward. And we have 1-year projects, like a one-off project that's started and completed in the year and funded in the year. An example of that would be in the fire area, where we have a projected for a command post retrofit. The next slide is the summary sheet of the 2008 to 2012 capital budget program. This document outlines and summarizes by expenditure category all of the expenses that we propose to undertake for the next 5 years, as proposed under the 2008 budget, broken down by specific categories. And then it also shows all of the funding sources that we'll be utilizing to fund the project. Within the budget, as it expands, is a multi-page document. There's individual records of each project, and similar to the way it's summarized here, it shows the funding sources that would be utilized on that project. This is a methodology we've been using for some time, and during last year's council review of the capital budget, at council's direction, we took it a step further, and we enhanced the design of the document. And basically, what we enhanced it to do was to provide better information to council for their decision-making process. There was 2 items that we looked at. First of all was the categorization, and then secondly of a project, and then secondly was the prioritization of said projects. If you recall, when we set up categories, we set up categories by your ability as a council to make a decision on a particular project. Category 1 projects were projects that were already undertaken, but that were multiple year, or they required funding, and they were already underway, and there was no ability to change course on that project. Category 2 were projects that were to start in that current year. So utilizing the same methodology, this year Category 2 projects would be projects that are going to commence in 2009. And then thirdly were Category 3 projects that were going to commence sometime in the future. We weren't going to start work on it this year and spend money on it, but we would be moving forward in subsequent years, and this allowed us to better plan where we were going. To enhance that, we also looked at prioritization. Prioritization was a council direction to look at how staff and senior staff felt on each project, because to give a better tool for council to make a decision on those projects. The projects were evaluated at both the divisional and corporate level, meaning that the divisional directors evaluated the projects based on the criteria established by senior staff, and then they came within a pool and it went through a corporate vetting process. Projects were either given a high, a medium, or a low category. We intend on using the same methodology this year, or based on council's input, obviously. Moving to the next area is the funding sources, and I think it's important that we go over, as we prepare our budget, some of the key areas that we will be looking at funding the capital budget. As you recall, the capital budget is primarily financed from transfers from the two main operating budgets, the general purposes budget and the utility budgets. Both the sewer program and the water program have transfers to capital. Those transfers to capital form the funding basis for the capital works projects in those areas. We also have specialized funds that we can call upon and use to fund capital works. Development charges, as you're all aware, and we did that with a workshop, discussed the development charges, are specifically generated income streams that are set aside for use to fund development projects. As you're aware, this year we will be doing a new DC study, which will be determining the rates for the next few years, and that monies that are generated are then used to offset the projects that we identified. There are some projects, such as the rehab of bridges and culverts, that local improvement charges are used to directly finance. We also get extensive government grants through both the province and the federal government as well, and that are used for capital works. Another area is external contributions, which would include, but not be exclusive to, the regional government or other entities wherein we enter into agreements for funding on a mutually beneficial project. The community also provides sources of funds for its community fundraising activities. We know that in the Bob Gale Arena Complex, there's fundraising that's coming forward. We also know that in other areas, such as the soccer field, there was extensive fundraising that was contributed by the user groups. And last but not least, certainly, is the use of debt. And it's used in two main areas where, first of all, we have a capital project that does not have a source of funding that we've identified from the items above, or in the case of something like the arena, where it would be impossible to fund a project of that magnitude, we would need to enter into borrowing for that project. So a large project would also entail quickly, we're going to go through the three primary areas so that we're familiar with the main sources of funds. The first is, as I indicated earlier, the transfers from the general purpose budget, and secondly, from the utility budgets. In 2009, as we prepare for our budget, we see that in the planned 2009 general purposes at the moment, we have $6.4 million that are going to be transferred to capital. In the utilities budgets, which will be coming forth in the next few weeks, we see that based on 2008 numbers, the contributions to capital from the sewer is $4.6 million, and from the water is $4.5 million. Obviously, if we were to reduce any of those areas, that would impact our sources of funds, which would have to force staff to reevaluate which projects go forth and which projects would be put to the back burner, so to speak. The next area is government grants. As you're aware, the province initiated a fund. We received it in late 2008, provincial infrastructure funding of $3.9 million. That's new money. It's a one-time provision of funds, which is based on future provincial surpluses, which under this economic climate may not be forthcoming, but it is $3.9 million, which is available for this capital budget to be used on project financing. We receive federal gas infrastructure funding, which has been announced as a source of income for rolling out to 2014 of approximately $2.5 million. We get provincial gas tax funding for transit from the province, and that's been announced, but that's an annual announcement. They don't go out multiple years, but it's been $1.4 million. We also are anticipating on the federal budget day, which I believe is the 27th of January this year, that there's been quite a lot of talk about an enhanced infrastructure program from the federal government, and probably when the province makes their budget presentation later in the year, there'll be announcements there. So we expect that there may be infrastructure spending. We do not know the details at this time, but certainly having January 27th as the announcement, we will have information to utilize to put together our budget. The last area, obviously, is debt, and debt is a useful tool for, like I say, in those large projects that you can't possibly have enough cash resources to pay for. But we're seeing some challenges in the capital markets. As everybody's aware, every day the newspapers and the TV announces more and more bad news. There's turmoil in the markets, and while interest rates on a short-term basis are falling, and we should see another announcement this week that the central bank is going to lower interest rates, the long-term rates and the cost of capital for long-term projects is increasing, and there is an anticipation that this will continue. There's also that capital, long-term availability of capital may be more difficult to get. As you may recall, the city has to borrow through the region. So we have to borrow through the region, and we have two alternatives. We can go to the capital markets and attain, this is what we've done previously, and attain, they fund our, or they float our debt out, and people pick it up, and we pay the region, and then they in turn pay the beneficiaries that picked up the debt. Or we can instruct the region to go through Infrastructure Ontario. Infrastructure Ontario, the old OCFA program, is now more aggressive in getting their products out there. So we have two opportunities and two availability for us to go and get long-term debt. The other alternative, as we put together our capital budget, is the use of debt, and versus to pay as you go. As I indicated, long-term debt, when it's a large project, is beneficial. But as you're aware, long-term debt also has to be repaid, and it imposes a little bit of inflexibility on future years' budgets. As you're aware, also, PSAB has been involved, or the rule changes that are coming, the accounting rule changes. So long-term debt may, in fact, be a better matching tool towards the capital asset models that are prepared. The next chart.
Mr. Harrison, excuse me. Just on that point, could you highlight the effects that pay-as-you-go program, and truthfully, I mean, I would rather see us go pay-as-you-go, but could you highlight the effects that it will have on our budget and when we would be able to fully implement a pay-as-you-go system?
Pay-as-you-go program would impact all of the projects. Pay-as-you-go implies that the sources of funds that you generate internally would be adequate to fund your capital program. So right now we would have to utilize what reserves we have or what funding we have available. At the present time, we would, if we were to go in that direction, I can't answer today what the impact would be, but certainly those projects that we are doing, that we are leveraging for, would be affected, and we would have to generate in future years' budgets the cash to move forward with that.
Okay. When's the earliest that we could, I guess, fully implement a pay-as-you-go program?
Well, it's hard for me to. Once again, we would bring that information back as part of our capital budget documentation. Like today is really intended just to set the framework for our capital budget. Work that our staff is going to be doing to pull that together. If that was council's direction, we would have to bring that forward and show you what the impact would be. The next chart is the debentures that were approved in the last budget process. As you can recall, in 2008, we didn't go to the capital markets. Because of the length of the budget debate, we were well into the summer, and the region, who is our agent for getting long-term debt, we weren't able to get any. There was a couple of projects that were carried forward from the previous year that we had planned to go with long-term debt. And then there were some other projects that we've identified that we would utilize debt on. As you can see, moving forward, there are some large projects, particularly the arena project is one that's noted in 2010, and others that we've identified that we do not have the cash resources internally, so hence we don't have the available funds to go pay-as-you-go, and hence we would need to raise the appropriate amount of money through financing. So this is the debt picture that was approved. Once again, though, as council is aware, we would need to come back to council as staff and get approval for any debt issue that we would need to do. So that's an annual exercise. To tell you, we would be looking in 2009 to exercise a debt issue this year. But before we do that, we do evaluate the projects that we have planned to use debt on, and would be bringing that forward. And so we move to the timing of our budget. As you can appreciate, it takes a significant amount of work to bring the capital budget together. It is really impacted by your decisions on the operating and the general purpose operating and the utility budgets, because that sets the transfers to capital, that sets your the large portion of the financing that would be available for funding the capital works program. We are also trying to do this year, there was some confusion last year because we cut off earlier in the year than the end. We cut it off at the end of September, and there was in our documents some confusion evaluating, especially when we got into the middle of 2008. So this year, what we're trying to do is have a full cutoff by the end of this month, which is consistent with our cutoffs for our financial statements for the year. And then we will endeavor to put all of the necessary information into our worksheets by the 20th of February, and then we would be able to do our appropriate internal reviews and present the budget binder to you on the 9th of March. And moving forward from that date, we would try to get the capital budget approved as soon as possible, because recognizing the fact that the longer we go out into the summer, the more difficult it is for our tendering process, and we fall behind other municipalities that may be using similar contractors for similar types of work. So certainly we would like to have that done earlier. And so in summary, on what we'd like, Mr. Chair, is to put some ideas forward to council to consider, and perhaps give staff some direction for the compilation of the 2009 capital budget. And these, based on our discussion, staff will provide the same categories similar to the 2008 budget. Staff, if the council so chooses, will provide the same prioritization that we did in the 2008 budget. One change this year we would suggest, if council is accepting of this, is that we would only put in the high priority projects in the category 2 items for the 2009. So anything that our directors felt were absolutely important, we would put in category 2. The others would be deferred to category 3, which obviously would mean that we wouldn't start till 2010. Staff will base our funding as of right now on the capital from the operating budgets based on the numbers I provided earlier, and on the utility budgets based on 2008. I know that it's we still have some discussions to go through on the operating budget later tonight, and we have discussions to go through on the utility budget when we bring that forth. But for our planning purposes, we will put those numbers out unless we're directed otherwise by council. And lastly, as consistent with what we talked about with debt financing or pay-as-you-go, we would look to incorporate the possibility of looking at Category 3 projects based on a pay-as-you-go philosophy. So certainly there's some changes to that, but certainly looking forward, Mr. Chair, for some direction from council or any questions that people may have.
Okay, I do have some comments from council members. I have Mayor Salsi that wishes to speak first.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank Mr. Harrison for his presentation today or tonight, and I appreciate the fact that staff will have an opportunity to give the council some indication about prioritization. I also think it's important that about a little more than a week from now, on January 27th, we'll be hearing from the federal government with respect to their budget. As we've heard from the provinces and the federal government, they truly want to stimulate the economy. My concern is, and I've tried to express this to those levels of government, if they're going to be providing financing for projects, that we would hope that they would provide 100-cent dollars, meaning that to come back to the municipality to force us to go back to the taxpayer to say we've got to cooperate or participate in a cost-sharing arrangement makes it very onerous on our residents. And I'm asking that the provincial and federal governments, and I've expressed this at the region and above, that they provide 100% dollars so that they won't come back to the municipality and say, we'll fund this $12 million project if you go back and get $4 million from the residents, and we get $4 million from the province and $4 million from the federal government. So until we see that, I'm not sure if we can really make that decision yet. It'd be interesting to see if the government, both governments want to fund and create economic activity. I think that should be their area of concern to really, truly stimulate the economy. They're prepared to go into a deficit. We can't obviously do that other than by borrowing money and debt. I think the only favorable point right now is that financing rates are low, but at the same time, we have tried to provide amenities to our residents by building new facilities, a new McBain Community Center, certainly the new Gale Center as well, and other projects that we're working on in terms of trying to make them affordable. So I think that the first thing I'd like to say is that hopefully the staff will take into consideration any provincial monies that are available on 100 cent dollars. We'll have a better chance to see this, as I said, next week. The other thing is we did come back from the Association of Municipalities Conference in Ottawa in August, and the province has offered us a $3.9 million infrastructure fund, or money that we have in our account, I believe now. And I'd like to make a motion that that 3.9 be used to be applied to capital works for the year 2009 projects.
Okay, I have a motion by Mayor Salsi, seconded by Councillor Iononi, that the $3.9 million grant from the province that the city received be used for infrastructure projects in the coming year 2009. I have Councillor Thompson that wishes to speak. Was it to the motion, or?
Not on that specifically.
Okay. Is there any other councillor then that wishes to make comment on the motion that's on the floor? If not, then I'll call the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just a little bit confused. Through you to Mr. Dulovic, it would be nice if somebody said provincially or federally, here's 100% dollars to do a project. We already know what projects. In fact, you usually have to do an environmental assessment to determine what projects, and you know what your priorities are with respect to public works and infrastructure for 2009. Regardless of whether somebody said they're 100% dollars, you can always, and from what I understand, they're going to give you an amount of money, and you utilize that probably for the existing projects. Otherwise, some environmental assessments take 6 months. We wouldn't even get around to utilizing it until probably halfway through the summer. So whatever dollars we get, we're going to accept for infrastructure. They don't have to be 100% dollars, because we can work them in to the budget and the projects that we already have prioritized, or we're going to have prioritized. Is that not an accurate assessment?
Through the chair, we do have a number of projects that I know the federal government is talking about shovel-ready, ready to go in 120 days, where we don't require environmental assessments. We have as a right to do them. Some of them are involving sewer projects, water main projects, where, as a matter of fact, the designs are done and the certificate of approvals, I believe, have been attained. So it's merely of getting the contract documents together, and some of them we can turn around in a month's time and get them out there. But a lot of those are projects that were identified in 2008 that we haven't got around to tendering yet, just because of the timing issue and all that. So we do have some projects that could be ready to go, depending on what the program is that the federal government puts out and what the conditions are.
Well, you didn't answer my question. Do they have to be 100% funded, or if they gave us a lump sum of money, we could work it in? Could we not?
It would be nice if it was 100% funded, but I guess we wouldn't turn away any dollars if
thank you.
Do it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I believe that staff is, or Mr. Harrison actually, is still looking for some considerations to council in the very last slide, looking for some direction. Councillor Thompson.
I meant to make a comment on that. A pay-as-you-go is appropriate, and I think we're in a position now where we really don't have a lot of choice. We've built up our capital debt to the point where it's getting, well, every dollar you get, you start paying it out in interest. And we already heard Mr. Harrison say that the increase for long-term debt is still on the rise. So it doesn't happen quick. You have to work at it over many years. And if they can come in with a couple of projects where we can at least start pay-as-you-go, and you work into it after you get your major debt down to where it's manageable. So I would certainly support and make a motion for acceptance of pay-as-you-go philosophy as soon as we can implement it. And I don't expect any miracles, because this is something that happens after you get your major debt, and you still have to use capital debt. You can't always pay as you go, but it's a good philosophy to work towards, and cuts down the amount of money you pay in interest, which can go towards providing services. So it only makes sense.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor that we implement a pay-as-you-go philosophy and that staff report back on the implications of such a policy. Do I have a seconder to that motion? Seconded by Councillor Wing. Do I have any questions or comments to that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Harrison is still looking for some direction from council, and in the very last slide, he's asking that he be directed to...
Is he simply asking for us to move the considerations in front of us?
Exactly.
So,
Thank you, Councillor Ionone, seconded by Councillor Thompson. Any questions or comments to it? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion is unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Our next presentation is going to be by Mr. Dulovic. He will be going over an overview of the 2009 general purposes budget, as well as council has the priority exercise that was handed out as part of our package. He'll be going through both of those. Mr. Dulovic.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Chair, I'm just going to go kind of pick up for where I left off back in December with the council when you got your budgets that night, and I had the good fortune of delivering the news and the challenge that was before council and staff and dealing with the budgetary challenges before us. So I'm just going to go through the challenge, the considerations for raising revenues and reducing expenditures, and then the next steps. Next slide, Dean. Just a kind of a recap of where we were last December. When we looked at new assessment, council directed us to only use new growth in assessment, and at the same time maintain the levels of service for operations. They weren't proposing any cuts to services, and just use new growth. That means new buildings that were put out there, new residential, new commercial. As a result, taking these things into account, we had an $8.8 million difference that we had to deal with. Council also asked for a general purposes budget priority exercise. We'll go over that a little later on. And I'll talk about that in detail. This is done by the directors as we went through all of the various items that are found in your budget binders. And finally, we have some items for consideration for council to consider in reducing expenditures or raising revenues. Next slide, Dean. And I'd like to stress these are things to consider. These are not recommendations by staff at this time. We're just looking for some direction from council if this is something they do want to consider, or it's not something that is palatable to them. This is just an overview of what was presented again in December. Just a reminder where that $8.8 million came from. It is in your budget binders. Dean, next slide, please.
Okay, Councillor Ionone, please.
Mr. Dulovic, to that point, the mayor just passed a motion for the 3.9
Yes.
to be applied to the budget, so that would cut into the 8.8, correct?
Yes.
Okay. If you remember back when we first got the budget binders, I not only spoke about that 3.9, but I spoke about the $6 million that we have sitting in a reserve from the sale of that property. And the comment I made that night was basically, we don't need to tap the taxpayer for a cent if we're to utilize both those pots of money, because that brings us really to 9.9. So if this council sits here and cuts back, and we apply that money, and we look to use some or all of the $6 million sitting in that reserve from the sale of the property in a year that we don't want to tax the residents, that's our decision to make, correct?
Yes, it's clearly your decision to make, and I think we clearly, as last time when we talked about it, we presented items to consider at that time too. It was a $3.9 million, and we said that was up to council to decide. Again, the $5.8 million from the Montrose sale, that was council's decision. So what we were trying to do tonight was just to give some council some thoughts. Again, these aren't recommendations. Take it or leave it. And you may simply want to say we're going to use the 3.9 and we're going to use the whatever we need from the 5.8 to deal with the 8.8, and we're done.
Well, I believe there's some
that
fat that can be cut from here, but for the resident watching or who's going to read the paper tomorrow, the only source of money out there is not them to be tapped. We also have this that we kind of put aside for a rainy day.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, those are clearly those are the options. And as we, the first one, the 3.9 million, that was one of the things that we had to consider. And the way the chart is set up, we talked about raising revenues or using that provincial revenue. So the impact, the accumulation of that is we've got into 3.9 of that 8.8. So what you'll see is here are some things to consider to get up to that 8.8. Here's some ideas to deal with that 8.8. You've already done the first one, so there's not much point in discussing that one any further. You've made that motion. direction to use the 3.9 towards the infrastructure.
On that point, Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, taking that scenario, we can certainly come in with a zero budget this year. But I think we have to, certainly there's things to cut out of the budget. I'm sure everybody has some ideas with respect to that. However, we all know we have an 8.8 deficit this year. We have a $11 million deficit next year, and we have a $16 million deficit the year after. So I think we have to be mindful of how we spend that dollars that have been left over from the land on Montrose Road. Hopefully we can spread some of it over the next 2 years, because it is without exception going to be extremely challenging to 210 and 211. Sure.
I think from staff's perspective, and I know in speaking to finance, we feel it wouldn't be prudent to use all of that $5.8 million in 1 year because of the challenges that we face in 2010 and 2011, because of the revenues not being there, the debentures for the arenas coming on stream that we'll have to deal with. So that would be staff's recommendation on that, not to use the $5.8 million in its entirety. So that's why we're suggesting some other reductions in expenditure so that they carry forward to the following year, so that you reduce those deficits in 2010 and 2011. Another item for consideration, again, is a reduction in our capital spending for 2009, as Mr. Harrison alluded to earlier. We're looking at $6.46 million in transfers to capital. That'll fund the various program, be it in Parks and Rec or Municipal Works and Transportation. They get that money from the tax levy to support their program. We're using 3.9 from the province for that. Something to consider is to reduce the 6.46 by 2.2 million. If you were to do that, again, you're up to 6.1 million in chipping away at that $8.8 million. The next item is the CIP funding. In totality, the three programs are $930,000. That's for downtown, citywide, and historic Drummondville. One of the thoughts may be that we simply combined all three together in one program. It's now $465,000 that we provide for all the CIPs throughout the city. Again, it's something to look at. And again, it would be first come, first served to get at that $465,000. If we get applications that exceed that, they would then put in the queue for consideration in 2010. Just a note, the activity where we've had the most activity is in the downtown. We've had some in historic Drummondville, and almost I think only $7,000 on the citywide. There's been very little in the citywide CIP program. So again, an item of consideration.
Sorry, could you just update council on the reserve fund that there is for the CIP as well?
Yes, what we have done is we have reserved the previous money from the previous programs that's available. So there's some money available. What we've done is all the applications that have been approved by council, we've set that money aside. Anything that hasn't been applied for, we've put in a reserve account. So there is some of those dollars available in addition to the 465 for 2009. I'm not sure the total. I don't know if Mr. Harrison, if he is aware of what those dollars are, but we could get that information to council if we don't have it tonight. So.
We'd have to get that to, I don't have the exact number. I have it in total for the entire division, but I don't have that specific number.
Okay. And will you speak to council about changing the way that we currently do our CIPs? Because I think we designate monies individually.
That's what I talked about. I mean, because we, is it 50% for each of the three areas, or do we simply make it one program citywide, or just for all of the CIP programs? And that's something to consider for council, to simply say, if we go along with the reduction, let's just make it one pot of money that anyone in those CIP areas can apply to that pot, and it's there until it runs out for the year. Last one on this chart here is capping the grant increases to 3% over 2008. That would result in an expenditure reduction of $348,000. Now, the two main drivers there are the $200,000 increase in Niagara Falls tourism. If you cap that at 3%, you would go from $400,000 to $412,000, so that's a $188,000 reduction. Again, this is over 2008. So therefore, the $100,000 request from downtown for events would not be there. So those two items alone are $288,000, and then the remaining dollars are a lot of those other little programs in there where we would say if anybody asked for more than 3%, we'd cut them back to just 3% over their request over 2008. So by doing that, you would reduce your expenditures by $348,000. So just with those four items there, we're up to $6.9 million of the 8.8, the target that we're trying to reach. As something that you wanted us to look at tonight, we talked about user fees. That would provide $40,000. Next one, the much talked about city leaf pickup service. Again, if we eliminated that program, we anticipate about a $77,000 reduction in expenditure there. I do know there will be a report coming from Municipal Works on that. They've done quite an extensive investigation on what other municipalities are doing and how successful they are in their programs and the resources required in order to have a successful program.
Could you let council know as well why it's not 120,000?
Yeah, part of it is one is the labor account and some of that where we use the seasonal staff, and that's where we would have a savings. But part of it is also from our fleet, and it's our equipment, and part of it is an in-out. We charge, fleet department is set up like a business unit, and they charge the various groups rent for the equipment. So it's shown as a revenue in fleet, but it's shown as an expense in another department. So there's some in-out going on, so you don't have the full benefit of that reduction in equipment, because you'll save on equipment replacement, fuel, and parts, but we'll still have the garage mechanics there. You won't see a reduction in mechanics, so you don't see the full benefit of that service being eliminated, so you don't see that full $120,000 savings. I believe that's what the program is.
Okay, thank you.
Another thing to consider, I know this council is focusing in on 0%. If you increase taxes by 2%, and that's based on CPI, from November 2007 to November 2008, the CPI was 2%. 1% represents $456,000. Once again, it's not a recommendation of staff. It's something to consider. If you were to go with a 2% increase, those are the dollars that you would generate. Something else that's come about when the budget was prepared last year in November, we were dealing with considerably higher fuel prices than we are now. We've had staff look at that once again. There's a bit of a risk in here if it goes up again, but if we're going by what's happening, we've left a little bit of cushion in there, but we've brought the figures down per liter, and we foresee a $90,000 reduction in expenditure there. We use about 1.6 million liters of fuel in the transit operations, so even 1 penny on a liter makes a significant impact on our budget here. So something to look at. And then finally, use of reserve funds, and we're talking to $768,000 of the $5.8 million. That's where that $768 would come from.
Sale of Montrose property.
The Montrose sale of the property. So we would use $768 of that, so we would still leave over $5 million of that intact if council were to go with these suggestions that staff are making tonight. And that, again, it adds up to approximately $8.8 million. As I've said, this is simply just for consideration, some things for council to consider when talking about the budget later on this evening.
Okay, Councillor Ioannoni.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Dulevic. Mr. Dulevic, what if we cap grant increases at 0? Because, quite frankly, when we're flush, I think we're pretty generous when the groups come to us. I really do. But if we're capping grant increases at 0, what's our savings?
I know Ken will have that number. I'm sure it's over 400,000, Ken?
I think these grant requests also include the library, the museum board, and others.
I do thank you for highlighting that, because we'd have to separate
Yes.
the city services as opposed to grant. I know we call the library a grant. I call it a city service. So that's where the semantics comes into it. I don't want to look at cutting the library or city services, but I think for the outside services that come into us, I can't abide by cutting for Project Share or they have people lined up outside the door, but nor can we be increasing when we're kind of at the same place.
Yeah.
So if
Interesting
it's
about
zero-
Project Share, I think they went zero. I think they asked the same amount
I
that
saw
they did
that.
the year before. So there'll be some additional dollars, but I know when we looked at it, that was something staff talked about, the museum and the library. Can we hold them to 3%? And there were some challenges there, just because the library needs money just for staffing. I mean, that's 3% alone right there. So it'd be very difficult for them to achieve that.
And I do believe in hard economic times, the library use increases dramatically. $3 programs for your kids, free entertainment, free internet, you're going to find that our library use has increased dramatically. And I think if you talk to Joe Longo, you'd find that out too. So I don't think that in this time, if everything else is increasing, that we cut back on the library, because the people are going to flock there.
Yeah. And then, we didn't even look at the other, even talk about the other grants that go out where they ask for the same dollars in 2009 that they received in 2008, something that council may wish to look at. But yeah, we haven't made any recommendations on that. That's council's prerogative that they want to look at that. So, as I said, these are just simply some things to think about. You may like some of them or none of them, but it's just some talking points to move the process along. That was the whole idea by presenting some of these.
Right, and I think a lot of those permissive grants are going to come in the priority exercise as well. Yes, they are. Yes. I have Councillor Maves and then Mayor Saucy, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm just wondering, I'm looking at the transit fuel savings of 90,000. I know it's looking into the crystal ball. I mean, we've got a large city fleet, too, with our various automobiles and trucks. I mean, would there be any savings on fuel with that?
There may be some. Again, it's that in-out relationship where if we cut on the expense, we would cut on the rent we charge the various groups. So there would be some. It wouldn't be anywhere near the 90,000 level. I think the transit uses quite a bit more fuel than we do in the rest of our operation. But could there be 20 or 30,000? There's possibly. I mean, we'd have to look at that in some more detail to see what kind of savings could be achieved there.
Okay, Mayor Saucy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to share with the members of council that with respect to the downtown BIA, I had a chance at our most recent meeting to explain that there was a feeling by members of council that they may be cutting back and freezing those increases. The $100,000 that they're asking for may not be granted, and I just said I don't want to predict what the decision of this council will be yet, but that I did advise them that it was some consideration that we were thinking about, and they are dealing with an increase in their own levy through the BIA, which is substantial. It's probably a record-setting amount that they'll go back to the membership in the next few weeks to discuss that budget with them. So just for the benefit of members of council, it may not be such a surprise, but I did put them on notice saying that we're trying to keep our tax increase to zero, and which is always very difficult because we know that even last year at the rate of 2.54, which is what we talked about in terms of being close to the rate of inflation, that's not even sustainable. We know that. So we have to think about the impact. But again, we understand what taxpayers have been saying to us and keeping the levy down as low as we can. I should also advise that last week at the region, we had the region's portion agreed at 0.6%, just a little more than a half, 1% increase, and we're still dealing with the police portion of that, which I think is at this point 3.4, and the total impact at the regional level with those two combined will bring us down to about maybe 2.4% thereabouts. So I just wanted to share that information with the members of council, just because it reflects to the other levels of government. Thank you.
Okay, next slide. Just quickly, where we're going from here, the next steps. At the January 26th meeting, you'll have the utility budget before you to go over. You have provided the direction to us tonight on the capital budget preparation, and we'll be going forward preparing that 5-year program. February 23rd, we will have a report to this council regarding the year-end surplus/deficit for 2008. And based on what we have right now, we see no surplus coming forward from the 2008 budget to go towards the 2009 budget.
Okay, thank you. You're going to go into the prioritization exercise?
So quickly to talk about the prioritization exercise that staff went through as requested by council. Taking your direction, we developed a simple program as what was used in the for the capital budget exercise that we did in 2008. Just so that the audience out there knows what staff did. It was based on 7 different criteria and coming up with a scoring that gave you a high, medium, and low priority. We looked at things like as legislated or mandated program. There are certain programs that you have to do, such as road maintenance. We have roads out there. We have to maintain them. We have no choice. We can't say, no, we're not going to maintain our roads. The relationship to the council's strategic priorities, health and safety that as it relates to our employees, and then risk. Risk, as we're talking about, to the corporation and to the community as a whole. If we don't carry out the program, what risk is that to our citizens out there and to the visitors that come to the city? Availability of external funding or user support. We have some programs that are in place because of external funding sources, and they can only be used for those programs. So if we cut out those programs, we wouldn't be able to tap into that external funding. So we scored that according to that availability. Again, we talked about operational impact. Again, if you didn't provide that service, what it would mean to the residents, to our operation. Quality of life that really related to the residents here in the community of Niagara Falls. What impact would that have on the quality of your life? And finally, economic development. So all those factors were considered to come up with the high, medium, and low ranking. And so if you look, the way it's set up, if you notice, they're related to the various tabs, and each, like for tab 2, the first 2 sheets can be inserted in your budget binder on your main tab 2, so you can put that in there. As you're looking at each area, you can have that in the area. And so, again, it looks at your high, medium, and low priorities. And this is simply another tool for council to look at if they want to look at some program reductions, looking at some other cuts if you don't want to use. We talked about consideration, you want to maintain that, 0% tax increase. Maybe you don't want to rely on reserve funding because it's one-time funding. You may want to look at some other programs here and say, you know what, maybe now's the time not to provide this program anymore. Maybe, and then you have to consider the value of it. So this is simply, again, it's not a staff recommendation. It's just a tool to help council try to look at if they're inclined to do reductions in expenditures. Have a look at some programs here that maybe it's time to look at doing some cuts there.
Okay. Are there any questions of Mr. Dulevic in regards to the priority exercise? Good job. If not, then are there any comments of council in regards to the priority exercise? I'll start with the Mayor, Mayor Salsi, Councillor Diodati, Councillor Iononi, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just think it's obvious that staff has done a fair amount of work here, and it'll give us an opportunity to go back in the next number of weeks to really look at areas of interest and concern that we have, and to see whether our feelings agree with those recommendations, and we'll have a chance to come back and discuss these at a later date, I know. So I think it's an excellent exercise to have us review the recommendations and to see how we prioritize as opposed to the presentation by staff. So I think that is certainly welcome. I know that obviously we've been hearing from the residents in respect of services that we try to provide. We have had a policy of trying to maintain services and keeping our costs down and relatively working with very little increases. And I think that's always been the challenge. And we've talked about this in the past, doing more with less, which is certainly always questionable as far as the sustainability. But I think that the economic times are upon us, and they've occurred so quickly and so deeply that we have to take some drastic measures. So obviously, I think I've heard around this table that members of council are sensitive to a zero increase into the taxes that people have to pay. And it'll be interesting to see what stimulus the provincial and federal governments do offer. And that's what I was saying earlier. Obviously, we wouldn't decline anything that they offer. But again, the sensitivity that I have is to have to come back to taxpayers to ask for more contribution to match dollars that they may offer. And that's why I was encouraging earlier any of those levels above us that if they were able to provide funding, that they consider the 100-cent dollar concept without having to come back to the council or the taxpayers and saying, look, we need another $4 million, we've got to raise revenue somewhere. So obviously we wouldn't decline anything, but I think after next week we'll have a chance to determine more so with regard to their presentation, and then come back to this council later to look at how we prioritize and see if we mesh the ideas that we've had presented to us tonight with that same movement. So I'm just pleased that we have a chance to do that in its entirety this year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Diodati.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff did a great job putting everything together here. My only caution, I would think, to this council, Mr. Chair, is that it's risky to look at 2009 in isolation. I think we're all well aware that we've got some major debenturing going on in 2010 2010 and 2011 to the tune of $35 million plus, and I think it's too soon to burn the furniture to heat the house. As well, I'd just be cautious at applying one-time funding to our current situation, because it's going to become, it's going to elevate, it's going to escalate. Our situation is going to become more challenging next year and the year after. Even fuel as an example. I know it's great that it's come down and we're benefiting from it, but that's too much of a variable. Consumer groups are predicting this summer, even sooner, it's going to be back up to where it was. And I wouldn't want to count on something like that. That's too much of a variable and out of our control to bank our future on. But in terms of my opinion, I think we need to look at the next 3 years, not one in isolation, because like I said, not to keep repeating myself, but I realize the big giant is coming next year and the year after, and we need to be prepared for it. Thank you.
I would agree, and I think that Councillor Thompson was alluding to it before. I don't think that we've tackled the real problem yet with it, which is our expenditures. All we're doing at this point sort of is plugging the hole with one-time funding, and eventually it's going to burst if we don't do some long-term financial planning. I have Councillor Iononi that wishes to speak.
Mr. Chair, do I understand that we're not looking at making motions to take expenditures out tonight?
I think I'll take any motion that's on the floor tonight. It was
Back
my
to
hope
you.
that we would. It was my hope that we would get into that discussion tonight.
Then I'll start,
Okay.
because I don't think
Don't
that...
be shy.
Well, we know how I am, though we are a real healthy group around this table tonight. I don't think anybody would be shocked to think the residents would have any problem with us taking out the $100,000 to the GNGH Foundation. I remember when I got on this council, they came to us and it was for an original 5 years. And they've long passed their 5 years, not to mention that the public's not that sure where their money is going anymore. I'm sorry I missed that meeting. I was at the Health Achieve conference when Mr. Somerville came, but I understand that the answers that this council were given weren't clear and concise either. I know something for sure. We cannot guarantee that that $100,000 is staying within this community and going to the residents in Niagara Falls. So my first motion will be that we discontinue the $100,000 to the GNGH Foundation.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor to eliminate the $100,000 grant that goes to the GNGH by Councillor Iononi, seconded by Councillor Wing. Are there any questions or comments to that? Councillor Carrier, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's a new grant request this year, isn't it?
No, it is not.
It's not a new one for this year because the old one's over.
No, it is not.
No.
It's not, so this is
They've carried it on. It's never stopped. It's been renewed every year.
We had a commitment for so many years.
5.
Not
And our
5.
was over last.
And it's over. So this is it. It was over last year, right? So this is a new request. Am I right? Last year was the last of the 5th?
I think so.
No, it is, I think
We're not sure, but fact is the 5 years has elapsed,
Long
and you know, it's just been perpetuated. There hasn't been a formal, you know, we want to continue, but they've continued to send in the letter making the $100,000 request each year. But the original 5-year commitment has elapsed.
And it has been met.
The reason that I'm asking that is that I'm assuming is it's over and this is a new request. My question was going to be, rather than single out the hospital, would be if we could have an amendment to say that we do not entertain any new grants, which would include that, which would include others, which would not single out the hospital or any other one person, but it would be that we would not this year entertain any new grants, which would include that.
Councillor Iononi.
You're a little late after I just singled out GNGs. But I will say to you, when they came here, they asked for 5 years. We fulfilled the 5 years, and it came to us just assuming that we were going to refund them, and we did. At this point, there's none of us that is not clear on the residents' opinion on the foundation and the discrepancy as to where funds donated from here go. If taxpayers want to donate to the GNGH Foundation, they will do so out of their pocket, not out of their tax payments.
I understand that. I was just suggesting that to take it one step further, that we would just entertain a motion. A friendly amendment would be that no new money this year, which would include that, which would include anyone else that's asking for money.
Let's see if that's a friendly amendment. Councillor Iononi.
Well, it is, but then you will also cover the downtown, which I'm 100% for, the $200,000 extra for Niagara Falls tourism, which I have no problem supporting. So that will cover a lot of that revenue that's up there. So I have no problem. Okay, I'm in.
Friendly amendment, Councillor Iononi? Yep. Councillor Wayne?
As long as it includes the items that Councillor Iannone just mentioned, yes, I'm in favor as well. I consider that friendly.
Okay. I have Councillor Thompson and then Mayor Selsey.
If you had have suggested to me that I was going to be supporting not giving $100,000 to the hospital a couple of years ago, I would have laughed because there's nothing more important than hospital facilities and health of the people in the community. However, I think this discussion and this motion tells you a story about the frustration of what we've been dealing with for the past, since 2001 really, but in earnest in the last several months. And I have to tell you, I listened to Councillor Fisher here a few weeks ago about the emergency ward and what is going on there. And I have to tell you that without exception, we have some serious problems with our health care. And I think that this probably is not the right area to be cutting, but obviously it sends a message that we are not happy with LHINs, with the Niagara health system, and something has to be done to change it. I happened to be in the emergency ward last Saturday, I believe, could have been Friday, and went in there and sat there for 3/4 of an hour, and the grumbling and the comments from the people sitting there for 5 and 6 hours. And one woman jumped up, this was 6 o'clock at night, her mother in a wheelchair, running out saying in very unsavory language that she'd been there with her mother since 10:30 in the morning. This was at 6 o'clock, and she hadn't seen a doctor yet. I don't know what we're going to do. It really scares you to death to think that you have a serious problem. Hopefully with a heart attack or something, you're going to get some priority, but 35 people sitting there and 5 and 6 hours. Whatever happened to the service in the emergency? So I will support the hospital withholding of the $100,000 this year. I think to just wholesale say that we're not going to fund. We have a few things in this community. One of them is not industrial expansion and creation of jobs for people in the industrial area. We spend about $543,000, I think, on economic development. The other lifeblood that we have is tourism. And to suggest that we are not going to be a partner with the tourist industry, and to suggest that the tourist industry isn't important to us even more today than it was last year and the year before, with 2009 being the year when passports are going to be necessary, and everybody in the community out there, tourist community, is extremely concerned and preparing for this to be an extremely dismal year. If you want to see people laid off and in lineups and not providing the resources to market this destination, I think we're going to have some serious problems. And I have problems with the budget request, and I think that the private sector membership puts in about $500,000, and this used to be a grant that was done on a matching dollar basis. I think the $600,000 is a little excessive in these difficult times, and I would think an appropriate thing to do to support the lifeblood of our community and the jobs that are so essential would be to do it on a matching dollar basis, and I think that works out to actually it's more than $500,000, but I think the $500,000 would be appropriate. That's what we spend on industry, and I think that would be appropriate. As far as downtown is concerned, we have one opportunity to support the downtown, make it survive. And I predict, without exception, that this next 12 months is going to be the period where we're either going to go on and have a bright future and survive, or we're not, and we're going to fall back, and everything that has been done thus far will fall apart. The people that have been given preferential rents have invested their money in the downtown. If they don't have the opportunity to survive over this winter and into this summer, then I think we've lost $100,000 for this next year to help them survive and to provide a future. If you're interested in the downtown, and and I support the Main and Ferry area the same way, and the amount of public works and infrastructure we're doing in that area is tremendous. And if you haven't heard that story, you should look into it. We have projects that are in the multi-millions of dollars to make sure that we do our part with the new museum, with the new development that hopefully is going to take place in the Falls View area. So rather than make a quick motion and sabotage everything we're trying to work for, I hope we would have some discretion with respect to this. Tourism is our lifeblood. This is extremely important now, this year, to support it and to make sure we get past this passport issue. So I would caution members of council and hopefully get their support for these projects.
Okay, to Councillor Ioannoni, I just want to say I think that staff has a problem with your motion because the only new funding that has been applied for this year is the downtown. The GNGH, according to staff, is not new funding. Neither is Niagara Falls Tourism. It's simply an increase in funding.
Thank you. That's what I thought before Councillor Carrios started. So can we do the motion the way I did it? Okay.
Absolutely. So there is a motion on the floor.
So I'll rescind that motion. And the motion, well, I'll rescind doing it, request board, and we'll start with the GNGH Foundation, the $100,000 to the GNGH Foundation.
Thank you. Mayor Salsi, please.
Just a point of clarification, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make sure that everybody is not confused. When we were talking about this, and I've heard the council talk about freezing, and I can appreciate that, and I support that concept. With respect to GNGH Foundation, they don't fund the operation of the hospital, as you know. They fund the purchase of equipment, and certainly I think they'll be fine. We have made a commitment to them in the past, and I think they'll be fine regardless. And I'm just wanting to say to you that we shouldn't be looking at trying to penalize them for what happens in the operating room. That's an operational issue, and it's the doctors and the medical staff that deal with that. So I didn't want to confuse that to anybody watching from their residence. Also, the fact that we know the challenges that we have before us in respect of tax increases. And I hear from hoteliers on a regular basis. I did have an opportunity, along with Councillor Maves and certainly Councillor Diodati and Councillor Thompson, to sit at the last Niagara Falls Tourism meeting when they have questions about the operation of Niagara Falls Tourism themselves and challenges. And I realize they're not easy challenges. I've always supported tourism in our city. It's our industry. There's no question. We are seeing growth in terms of new development and physical plant. We have a shortage right now of employees. That I know that the Hilton Hotel in particular has to hire 450 people between now and May to meet their 1,000 quota, and they're anxious to get people employed and working there. But I can say to you, I understand the idea of what council is saying around the table and trying to keep our figures frozen to last year in terms of the grants. So I don't think that any motions we make should be punitive. However, I think they have to be made with some wisdom. And in the same light, I didn't want to put the library, and I'm just reminding you again, the library and the museum board in that situation, because we did qualify that, but I wanted to clarify that as a point of order before, a point of clarification that I didn't want to include those two in that restriction because of what we actually do with that.
Okay, thank you. If there isn't any other councillors that wish to, oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Fisher.
Thank you. The hospital. Recently, they made an announcement to lay off 5,000 frontline workers. And in the same token, and those are very important people to us. And in the same token, they won't listen to us about the location of a hospital that's going to cost us millions of dollars. I don't understand in this economic time why they don't leave us alone and let us deal with our own hospital in our own way, and we could do a better job. I'm sure. Yes, I did spend many hours sitting with a critically person who was in deep trouble and severe pain who need morphine. That's a long time from 10 o'clock in the morning till 6:30 at night. That's a long time, so I understand what you're saying. Leave us alone. Leave our hospitals be. we will fund them if you leave us alone. We don't want to go to St. Catharines. So if they don't want to do that, I definitely agree, let's not give any more money. But in the same token, I also say the library. The library, I sit on the board, and I have sat on there for many years, and they understand our financial crisis. They have gone back to the drawing board. They will come in with a better proposal. So realize they're prepared to work with this economic crunch. And I would hope to think that all the other boards and people who have asked for money will go back and come in with a better proposal. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Carrio, please.
To the motion. To the motion.
To the motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just like to go along the lines of the mayor. Let's not confuse what the GNGH Foundation is. They're an organization that raises money for equipment purchases for our hospital. If we cannot afford to make the donation, I understand that. But I'm not going to not support it because of problems with the operation of the hospital. I will support the motion because I don't think this is a year for us to come up with another $100,000. And I'm prepared to go that way through the budget and do the things that I think are important to cut out of the budget. We do this every year. We all say we're going to tighten up on the budget, and then each one of us individually gets up and spouts out about why they should keep their pet peeve in the budget. Well, I'd like to see the money go to the hospital foundation, but I think this is the year that we have to put our foot down and say we cannot afford to do that this year, but not because of the operation of the hospital, because I don't think we can afford to put that donation to the taxpayers this year.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ioannoni, please. Oh, Councillor Wing.
When the Hospital Foundation was here making their presentation, I remember I asked some questions. The money, the $100,000 in Niagara Falls taxpayers' dollars that we give to them gets spent on equipment, which then goes into the ownership of the NHS, which we all love dearly. You know, I'm sorry, I'm not taking $100,000 of Niagara Falls taxpayers' money again and giving it indirectly to the NHS. I will not do that, and we all know we've got to cut. You know, we've already frozen our own salaries. I know it's mostly a token gesture, but this is where we're at this year. This is where we were going to be at for some time to come, and this is an easy one to start with.
Okay, there is a motion on the floor to eliminate the 2009 grant to the GNGH of $100,000. All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillor Ioannoni.
Thank you. I'd like to, absent the Niagara Falls Library and the museum services, I'd like to freeze all grants at 0%.
Okay. I have a seconder to that motion, Mayor Salsi. Any questions or comments to that motion? Councillor Wing.
Yes.
Just the museum keeps getting mentioned. I just want to note that I have a conflict on the museum.
Museum portion?
Yes.
So noted. Thank you. Any other comments to the motion? Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, I'd like to make an amendment that the Niagara Falls Tourism be given $500 instead of $1,000.
I'll ask if that's a friendly amendment.
So what, you dropped the request from 200,000 additional to 100,000?
I think that's what he's asking.
I can't go. I can't. No. You know, and just to speak to that, I think we're hard, and I understand we've supported the increases last year. We even used the fact that times were tough to increase Niagara Falls Tourism's budget last year. But I'll say this: we can't hold Project Share at bay while they have, you know, at 0%, while there's people lined up there, and give the tourism industry $100,000. I can't do it in all good consciences. We can't tell the Boys and Girls Club, we can't tell any of them, you can't have an increase and give tourism, which the residents still have problems with us funding, more money. I can't in good conscience do it. I understand the premise, I really do. But I don't think this is the year we can do it. And we either do what's popular or we do what we should do. And in this case, I think we have to do what we should do, and that's hold everything at 0 short of the services. I have a problem with the library, too, that I'll deal with later. I'm sorry, the museum. But for the grants absent those two, I want to hold them at 0.
So I take it that's not a friendly amendment?
No.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Thompson.
I would like these taken separately.
Okay. Would you like only Niagara Falls Tourism pulled
Yeah,
out?
for sure.
Okay. So Councillor Thompson has asked that Niagara Falls Tourism be pulled out. I think he has the right to do that. So we'll deal with that one separately, perhaps afterwards, if there is a motion on the floor. Therefore, the motion... The motion falls to all permissive grants, that there be no increase.
Yeah, I'd like the downtown also to be pulled out.
I don't know that that was part of this one.
Well, you can ask to have anything separated for a motion.
No, but it wasn't part of this motion, I don't believe. This motion dealt with permissive grants. This motion. Okay, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you can separate it.
Okay. Therefore, the downtown and Niagara Falls tourism are pulled out. So the motion on the floor then would deal with any other grants that the city provides.
Does she have to accept that? She's the one that made the motion.
I'm watching them do this, I didn't.
Yeah, that's her motion.
I'll ask the clerk.
Separate any motion.
No, you can separate any more.
That's what I thought too.
I don't like voting on it separate.
Okay.
My vote's the same.
Yeah. Just the downtown and Niagara Falls tourism have been pulled out.
The library?
The library was not part of the motion to begin with. And nor was the museum.
They're city services.
Mhm. Okay. So we're dealing with every other organization or permissive grant that requests funds from the city. And the motion is that there be no increases for any of the organizations in 2009. Does everyone understand the motion? I think Councillor Thompson has asked for a recorded vote.
Everybody's clear? Okay. Councillor Diodati?
4.
Councillor Fisher?
4.
Councillor Iannone?
4.
Councillor Carrier?
4.
Councillor Maves?
4.
Councillor Pietrangelo?
4.
Councillor Thompson?
4.
Councillor Wayne?
In favor.
Mayor Salsi?
4.
Carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Iannone, you still have the floor.
I guess that I'm doing also hold, pardon me? Yeah, you like that, don't you? Hold at 0, Niagara Falls Tourism and the downtown.
Okay.
Do them
Yes,
separate.
they
You
can
want
be
them,
separate.
okay, first I'll do Niagara Falls Tourism, again, hold Niagara Falls Tourism at 0.
Okay, there is a motion on the floor that Niagara Falls Tourism's grant request stay at $400,000 instead of moving up to $600,000, seconded by Councillor Wing. Any questions or comments of the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Again? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you say that. Okay, well,
Councillor Diodati?
Against?
Councillor Fisher?
Against.
Councillor Iannone?
4.
Councillor Carrier?
4.
Councillor Maves?
4.
Councillor Pietrangelo?
4.
Councillor Thompson?
No.
Councillor Wayne?
In favor.
Mayor Salsi?
4.
It passes.
Councillor Iannone.
Thank you. Now I'll freeze the downtown at 0, so the $100,000 is not going to the downtown, so again, freeze at 0.
Okay, there is a motion on the floor, seconded by Councillor Wing, that the request for $100,000 made by the downtown BIA.
Can I just make a statement? It doesn't make us anti-tourism or
No.
anti-downtown. I have never governed in a recession, so I think we're all looking at this like we're looking at it at home. You pull up your boots, you don't spend the extras, you keep at what you can afford. And I quite frankly think this is what we're doing, is we're doing what we can afford. It doesn't make us anti-anything.
Just for that comment, Councillor Diodati?
Yes, Mr. Chair. There's two schools of thought to the situation. Some say, that this is the time that you invest and you spend and you advertise. I mean, the federal government, we're calling on them in the province to step up all their infrastructure and spend. If they had the same philosophy, this is the time to pull back, I'm just wondering where we would be. Here we are, we're quick to, throw some cold water on our support of downtown for some momentum. The key here, as far as I see it, is momentum. Once you get momentum, you can push your car with 2 fingers, but it's getting started that requires all the work. Well, they've got momentum, they're getting results, and for a little bit of money, in comparison to what we spend on a lot of other things, for $100,000, I don't think this is a money issue as much as a support issue. I think it's a mistake to not support the downtown now. They're in a critical stage. They're in their infancy. They're showing a lot of great promise. And for us to pull the plug on them now, I'm concerned it does not show a support for the success that they're having and they're about to have.
Okay, thank you. And I do have some other speakers that want to speak to that point as well. I don't think it's fair, though, to compare us to either provincial or federal government, seeing as they can run a deficit and we cannot. So I have Councillor Wing, Mayor Salsi, and Councillor Ioannoni, please.
Councillor Diodati said it, infrastructure. I mean, I too believe that in a recession, this is what we need to be spending on: bricks, mortar, roads, pipes in the ground, those sort of things. You know, the more ephemeral things like, unfortunately, advertising. And I was really torn on Niagara Falls tourism because I too believe that we need to keep tourists coming here. But Councillor Ioannoni's already explained it very well. You got to treat everybody fairly. Festivals, I'm sorry, that's not infrastructure. They don't equate in the least. You know, that is fluff. What we need to spend on is the infrastructure, the bricks, the mortar, that sort of thing, projects that are already in the works. We can't be starting new stuff. We had that discussion around here tonight. I think we're starting to get it. So, you know, this is just another new thing that we can't afford to do right now.
Okay, thank you. I have Mayor Salsi and then Councillor Ioannoni.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to reiterate my point that I brought up at the BIA meeting, that I think the BIA is aware, and this has no bearing with respect to our support or lack of support of the redevelopment of our downtown. I think Councillor Diodati and I have been probably the two strongest proponents of our downtown core. However, they are going to ask for grants from the province and the federal government. Those applications have been submitted as we speak now. They are prepared, and they are going to request greater money for their events and festivals. This is money for events and festivals that we're talking about. And they have also said to me that they can be more efficient this year than they were last. It was their first year, and they know they spent money that they might be able to be a little sharper on in terms of curtailing expense. They know where they can maybe save some dollars. So I think that they can be more efficient. They know the challenge we have. When you look at raising all the taxes at whatever rate we would have to raise to meet the other demands of the budget, I think that I'd rather see a decrease in property tax than increase the $100,000 levy. I still support downtown very sincerely. I sit on the BIA there, as I said, and I have no qualms about supporting this motion. So I'll vote in favor of the retention of withholding the $100,000 increase. It's not a lack of confidence. Sustainability is a question that we all have in our minds in respect of the commitment. We're bringing and introducing new tenants there all the time. Whenever we can promote the downtown core, we work closely with them. Our staff works closely with them. We're going to be working as a council certainly more closely in respect to that. So I don't think we should interpret our decision here on the budget as a lack of faith. We do have a commitment in terms of infrastructure. They've been making it work, and I know that Mr. Grunn and all the businesses there have a challenge this year, and he's told us this is his do or die year. We all support, I think, the redevelopment of our downtown. So I don't want to interpret a lack of support of the $100,000 for events as not supporting the downtown redevelopment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ioannoni.
In a recession, everything's about money. Everything. People who are lining up at Project Share, who are hoping to get their kids into reducer-sponsored programs, everything is about money. So as we read this budget, I think we're all sitting at home going, how are we going to do this? So to say that that's not the utmost thought on every family's mind at this time is minimizing the problem. The problem's not new. We've been, when the state's hiccups, we get it. It's been coming for a long time. So to me, it has nothing to do with support or giving them a little push. Everything we do now is about money.
Okay, Councillor Carrier, please.
Just want to echo that, Mr. Chairman. Week after week, everyone around this council table has been voting $10,000 to this business, $20,000 to that business. We've been giving them grant after grant after grant. We've all supported them. We're all still supporting them. It's the new money I can't support. And I think there's still $460,000 in a CIP they're going to ask us to support, another $500,000 that they'd like us to approve. So I don't think that our vote against this is a vote against the downtown.
Okay, there is a motion on the floor to not approve the $100,000 request for 2009 from the downtown BIA. There has been a request for a recorded vote. I'll turn it over to the clerk, please.
Councillor Diodati?
Against.
Councillor Fisher?
I'm for it.
Councillor Ioannoni?
For.
Councillor Carrier?
For.
Councillor Maves?
For.
Councillor Peter Angelo?
For.
Councillor Thompson? No. Councillor Wayne?
In favor.
Mayor Salsi?
For.
Carries.
Councillor Ioannoni, you still have the floor.
Thank you. Mr. Dulovic stood up there and spoke about merging the CIP monies.
Yes.
Having the pot in there to cover the two.
Yes.
We've made it condition. cover the three.
Yes.
And I think at this point, that's the best we can do. I hate to say that's the best we can do, but right now, financially, that's the best we can do. So I'd like to make a motion that we adapt that principle that Mr. Dulovic put before us, and remember that those that come before us to apply for CIP funds that we approve, we've done it conditionally upon taxes must be paid. Some taxes have come in through and be paid. I think this will streamline the application. It will spur, I think, more development throughout the community and not just the downtown. Not that I'm not glad they've been starting to pay their taxes. I'm thrilled that some of them have been paid. But at this point, that's all we can afford.
In Mr. Dulovic's presentation, as well as merging, I guess, the three CIP funds, he was also recommending to council that the funding for the CIP, or the three CIPs, be reduced by 50%, down to $465,000, and that would include as well monies that are in CIP reserve fund.
I have no problem with that.
Is that the motion that's
Yes.
on the floor? Do I have a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Mayor Saucy.
And I'll just second it, just to speak to it as well. The idea that we have three CIP programs, as you know, one being the industrial and the other being Main and Ferry, and of course the first one being the downtown VIA. We do have a consideration. This is for 1 year, first of all, and the question is, it may encourage people to come forward and to maybe stimulate and encourage them to do something as opposed to sitting back. So if it's first come, first served, Mr. Chair, I think that will help the initiative in terms of the funding. And I guess if there are people left over at the end of the year, then we'll have to have them be considered for the following year. So I don't think it's, again, a lack of confidence by the council. It's just setting some priorities and encouraging people to come forward initially if they do. And again, the only other point I'm not certain about, I'd like to ask staff before we vote, is to the residential component. And I'm sure Mr. Bolberg is not here, but the residential component that we're talking about in terms of developing residential units on second floors and above, has anyone applied for anything like that, or is there any application in the works that we should be looking at?
Perhaps Mr. Dulovic can answer, but I don't think that he's aware of any application at this time.
Yeah, through the chair, I know I'm familiar with the program and talking, we haven't heard of it. There's been some talk about potential residential development, but we haven't seen anything.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Diodati.
Yeah, my challenge here is with regard to pooling all the CIP money. And that's a penalty to the downtown, because as it stands, they're the majority of the money in that. Now, if we're going to reduce them by 50% individually, that's a different thing than pooling them and reducing them by 50%. That's a penalty to the downtown, and that I would not support.
Okay. I don't know if staff wants to respond to that. Oops, sorry. Councillor Thompson.
Well, can you tell us how much is left in the reserve fund? Particularly, are we talking a huge cut here, or is it really not that much when we take into consideration what was left over from the last year?
The amount that's in the reserve fund is carried forward from the beginning of 2008, and while I don't know the exact amount, it is approximately in the $900,000 range.
So this really isn't going to be a serious impact on the downtown or anybody if they have that in reserve anyway.
Well, for the previous years, the money's been carried forward. For the past year, for 2008, there's been significant grants, as you are aware, because you did pass it, and we're in the process of doing our year-end adjustments. So,
how much was spent last year? Can you tell me? 200, 300, 400? Wouldn't be anywhere near that, would it? 300?
It would be on the Main and Ferry, I believe we spent a significant amount of the amount that's budgeted at 275. Of the citywide, there was nothing spent.
What about downtown?
No, that's a citywide program. Yeah. And then for the downtown, combined with the monies that were used for the downtown events, plus the applications, we'd be pretty close to the full amount for 2000.
So this isn't going to be a negative impact. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry, Councillor Wing.
My only concern about this is, as I mentioned earlier, in times like this, spending on infrastructure is important. And the CIP monies are there to encourage matching grants from the private sector. So because the CIP monies are available, you often get private businesses putting their money on the table, and it creates work. And, you know, I'm just wondering about whether this is the wisest thing to be cutting, because we get economic activity in the community that we might not otherwise get. You know, I'm just wondering, you know, because as long as it's bricks and mortar sort of stuff that, you know, and most of it is facade work, building improvements, you know, that sort of things. I'm just wondering if this is the sort of thing.
Perhaps I can just have Mr. Burton explain what staff's premise is on reducing the amount of funding. I don't believe, want to reduce the overall amount of CIP funding, just reduce the amount put in for 2009, because they don't believe that all of it will be accessed. Council will always have the opportunity in future years to replenish that CIP pot. And perhaps I can ask Mr. Burton to elaborate.
Through the chair, in the past, we have been over contributing through our budget exercise each year. What is not actually spent in the year is being reserved in special purpose reserves. Now, our first responsibility is to make sure any claims that we're aware of that have not been paid out, that we've got enough funds to do that. And we do. We have enough reserves to carry on in meeting our obligations. Reducing this year's allotment by 50% down to $465 is not going to injure or, we think, preclude businesses, residential applications coming forward. If there is a run, so to speak, we do have reserves to help handle any kind of run on the bank. At the same time, if there are so many applications, it is a first come, first served on a merged pot. That's the idea. And then whoever is not getting their claim paid, that is, it's approved but it's not paid, it would be first in line for 2010, when you get another chance to put money in the budget for those CIP claims. Does that answer the question?
It does, but I just want to know if I'm understanding this clearly, though. Right now, downtown is $470,000, and to compare another group, let's just call it citywide, $185, right? So they're separate and distinct. Yes. When you merge them, it's 50-50 opportunity for everybody.
Yes, and I think staff can elaborate, though, on the fact that monies for the citywide CIP have never really been accessed.
I use them as an example. I don't want to draw attention to any other one.
I understand.
Right. So that's why I'm saying, so there's two groups with a very big differential in amount allowed. However, once we merge them, it becomes one pot equally as accessible. So in a sense, you're giving twice the amount of money to the citywide, and you're reducing by 50%, you know, and I'm generalizing the amount for downtown. So what I'm saying is, in this case, is there any benefit to downtown in this example I just gave you?
Through the chair, yes. The 465, if we had $465,000 worth of claims from downtown and they were first to the pot, they would get all of it.
Okay. And on that note, Mr. Chair, then if we were to use another group like Main and Ferry, who used up most of theirs, then they also would be first in line to access the excess from downtown in that example. No, but they would have access to the tank, would they?
I think Dean would like to speak.
Yeah, just a couple of other points. You mentioned the 180 for citywide. If you reduce it by 50%, there's still this 90,000 allocated to them for next year. We don't think there's going to necessarily be any applications for that 90,000. So that 90,000 could be accessed by the other two CIPs. The other thing, though, this is also building in a little bit of competition amongst the CIPs, you know, sort of telling these developers and businesses, hey, there's finite money there. Get your applications in quick. Do your work. Get your applications in quick because it's finite. So that may encourage development as opposed to people thinking, well, there's always this pool of money. There's a lot of reserve. There's a lot of money socked away for historic Drummondville. We can access it any time. I think this will actually maybe spur them to get their applications in quicker.
Okay. Mayor Salsi, please.
I was trying to make that point before, Mr. Chair, that the clerk is just qualifying. He said it so well, but also the fact that if we had an application and we're out of funds, it doesn't preclude them from coming back to us when funds are available. And I understand that as long as they meet the requirements, they can still access those dollars. So if we have any projects that happen to be built out before the end of the year, they may have to wait until next fiscal year. So I think that would be the answer that we could give them. We wouldn't discourage them, but we still have an ability to accommodate their needs, but the next tax year.
Correct. Councillor Mays, please.
I just want to know what the maximum is that an applicant can get on that, under that program. If there is a maximum in that.
Yeah, and I'll turn it over to staff. I think it depends on what they're applying for. Oh, sorry. Mr. Hurlovich?
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I don't know the exact figure. It's under $10,000.
So it's under 10,000. So, I mean, that if it's under 10,000 per applicant, I mean, you still got room for 46 applicants at 10,000 each. So there's plenty of room there. I think, and we're not barring anybody. We're just capping it. That's all. Is that correct? So I think there's plenty of room there for what's going on.
On that point, it'll be half of that. There won't be 46. It'll be half of that. That's proposal to go to half.
You go to 465. That is the motion. Because right now it's 930.
Oh, okay.
Councillor Wing.
Plus the reserve funds from last year.
And my other concern is it was discussed that even if a project qualifies, if the funds, if there has been a run on the bank, so to speak, and the funds aren't there this year, then they wouldn't be able to get them this year. They'd have to wait till 2010. And as everybody knows, the credit market's really tight right now. If a business owner is going to the bank to get a loan to do the work, and suddenly this money that they were hoping to see it's questionable when the cash flow is going to come in, would that potentially erode their ability to secure the capital they need to do the project?
Okay.
Well, just to, not to belabor this, the fact of the matter is we feel that we've overestimated the amount in that fund over the last few years, and there's so much in reserve, we're confident that we'll be able to sustain the applications for the coming year.
Just to clarify, Mr. Chair, for council, coming up here, I thought that I had this information. I didn't. I went down to my office and picked it up. In the downtown reserve fund, there's $900,000 approximately. In the citywide reserve fund, there's $350,000. And in the main and ferry, there's $225,000. Now, that doesn't take into account any transfers that we may do for the 2008 year.
Correct.
So there is room, as everyone is suggesting, that for 1 year, we would reduce the amounts transferred, and then we would move forward with that.
Correct. Councillor Inoni.
Thank you. So if that motion goes through and we cut that in half, can we use the other half to apply somewhere else? We can.
Well, we've reduced our expenditure.
Okay.
By 465, our overall expenditure.
Gotcha.
Councillor Carrier.
Well, then, how much money is in the CIP budgets? 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 1.6? Now, for the 460? What's in there?
In reserve.
When you add it all together?
In reserve?
Reserve?
Well, as we say, every year we have a process where we budget. Right now, your annual contribution is $470 for downtown, $185 for citywide, and $275. So what's that?
That's the increases that we're not giving up.
$900,000. So over the course of the last couple of years, the money hasn't been spent, but it's been reserved. And so it's accumulated $1.4 million. That's what's sitting in the reserve.
1.4 plus the 460 that we're going to put in this year?
Well, no, because next year, in 2009, you're budgeting it. You're hopeful that people will come and spend that money.
But the pot will have.
But if you happen to have more applicants in the coming year than the 460 would allow, you could draw upon the reserves to pay for those applicants. So in no way, what you're basically doing is that you're not continuing to put away money for something that the applications are not coming in as fast as we would.
What you're saying is we just can't seem to give the taxpayers money away fast enough. Is that what it is? We can't seem to give it away fast enough. But anyway, I like to look at this in a different way rather than say we're cutting. We've got almost $1.5 million that the taxpayers have put up to fund these CIP things. What are we cutting? We got to put $1.5 million in there that they haven't taken yet. We're talking about putting another $500,000 or $460,000 in. I don't look at this as cutting anything. I look at this as the taxpayers dipping in their pockets for another $500,000, and there's already $1.5 million in there.
I don't believe that the reserve fund includes 08 either. Correct?
It doesn't include 08?
No, it does not.
08's not the final, the year is not finalized yet, so it doesn't include any monies that are...
We got more money than brains.
Got it.
Councillor Mays, please.
So at that rate, we've got, if 10,000 is the maximum, we've got enough for 180 applicants. I mean, 10,000. I don't think we've more than 10,000.
Yeah.
Even at that, let's say it's 15, you still got room for about 100 or so.
Okay.
I mean, it's hardly even worth putting in the budget.
Yeah, yeah. Mayor Saucy.
Well, I just wanted to qualify that. I can't recall all the information on the CIP, but don't forget the residential component. That's why I asked the question.
I don't want to get focused on how
And
many,
we have, that's 20,000 per unit. We've approved an application for a development on Main Street that's a number of units that they may be taking advantage of that this year. They'll start construction. So we have residential as well as the facade improvements. So there's money there. I think what we're doing at the 50% is very safe. And at the least, we'll have a chance to reconsider this time next year. This project will take more than, if it's building 60 units, it'll take more than a year to finish the project. So I think we're safe. That's why I asked the question if there's any additional residential units that we've heard from. And if they haven't got the money this year, we'll be able to provide it for them next year. It's an incentive that we spend to create more revenue for the taxpayer to offset their taxes. The commercial tax rate is higher than the residential rate. If we can get more commercial dollars in stimulating our downtown development, it's protecting the income stream that's there and certainly alleviating the pressure on the residential component. So it's money, taxpayers' money that's spent to generate more money for taxpayers.
Understandable. Councillor Ioannoni.
And let's go back to what this exercise started at. We started at needing 8.8 million. We're down to we need 4.3 million with applying that money that we passed and cutting out those other grants. Take away another $400,000 spending if this vote goes through, and we're down to needing 3.9 million. That's what we said we had to come in and do, make difficult cuts. And that's what we're doing.
Okay. If there isn't any other councillor that wishes to speak to the motion on the floor is to pool the CIP funding citywide amongst the 3 CIPs that are out there right now, and also reduce the 2009 funding contribution to the CIPs to the level of $465,000. Everyone understand the motion? Councillor Wing.
Yeah, I'm just going to vote against it as a cautionary measure. You know, this came up suddenly tonight. I would have preferred to have had the opportunity to get some input from, I mean, I'm assigned to 2 BIAs. One of them is in a CIP area, and I would have preferred to have gotten some input from them on this beforehand. So I just don't want to vote yes and then regret it later, so I will vote no, even though I understand and support in principle what's being proposed in terms of saving money.
Okay, thank you. You've heard the motion. Ready for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Wing is opposed. Motion carries. Councillor Ioannoni, are you done?
Yeah, we've only shaved now $4.3 million. So
Councillor Thompson, please.
Yeah, I know this was mentioned in the items by the engineer, and I know a report is coming in on leaf collection, which is not going to be supportive. There's $77,000 there, and I'd like to eliminate that, which I've been trying to do. And I'd also like to have the $250,000, which was included a couple of years ago for the Humane Society and remains there. We haven't made any plans. We had a study done on what we were going to do, the possibility of providing our own shelter, possibility of doing other things. That is still sitting there, and if we're cutting, it's not necessary to have that 250, and I would like to have that cut out at this point too.
Okay, can we do them in separate motions, and I'll come back to you after leaf collection? Okay, there is a motion on the floor made by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Wing, to abandon the city leaf pickup service. Are there any councillors that wish to make a comment to the motion? Councillor Diodati.
I'm traditionally a supporter of this service. However, I realize with the way things are today, it's going to take additional money to make it work properly. I did take the time to speak to a number of other municipalities outside of the Niagara region and in the United States, and there's no question that it'll take more resources than what we're putting forward now. We're not doing a good job. We're doing actually a terrible job, and if we don't have the funds to make it happen properly, I would have to regrettably, support the idea of abandoning it, certainly, until the economy turns around.
Okay, thank you. Any other councillors wish to make a motion? Motion? Oh, sorry, a comment. Thank you. Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Councillor Thompson. Move that. I'm sorry, the motion is to cut $250,000 from...
There's a budget they've requested, and there's also $250,000 that has been in there for the last couple of years that was supposed to do whatever we decided with respect to animal control in the future. It has not been utilized. We don't have a plan for it this year. We haven't discussed it. We haven't had any dialogue or discussion with the Humane Society, and I think there's an opportunity at this point, because of all the dialogue and discussion, to cut out the $250,000.
Okay, and the $250,000 is part of the services that they currently do?
It's just put in there for the last couple of years in case we needed it for our own shelter or for changes with respect to animal control.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. I know the mayor wants to speak. I also have Dean that wishes to speak. I'll go to Dean first.
Just a point of clarification, well, not clarification, but full context, and I don't disagree with anything that Councillor Thompson said. He's correct that the last 2 years, or a carryover into this year and also from last year, was an accommodation for about $200,000 or $250,000 for the possibility that we might have to build our own shelter or possibly go somewhere else for sheltering services. Staff has been in dialogue with the Humane Society over the last year. We've been impressed by the efforts and the new board in place. And in fact, last August, I believe it was, myself, Mr. Castrilli, and Mr. McDonald at the time went to the shelter and felt that the changes they had made there were substantial and impressive. My only concern is by taking that $250,000 out, you're automatically assuming that they will receive the status quo they've received for providing the other animal services that we have a contract with them, and we haven't really finalized what that figure might be. So I would like to be, I think there should be some cushion in that amount, so I don't disagree that some money should be taken out of that account, but I'm not sure we want to go with the full $250 because we're not sure what the agreement may come out between us and them. We're going to work towards an agreement, but we don't know what the quantum is on that yet.
Councillor Thompson, please.
Well, I guess any discussion with respect to that, I think, is going to take a long time. If there were changes that are going, the request has been met. That's their, and we're talking about animal control for the municipality. 400 and how much? It doesn't.
Yeah.
Almost $500,000.
About 700.
So pardon me? Yeah, but that's what 250.
Actually, the number is 452.
452.
An additional
plus 250.
Okay, I would remove 200 and leave 50,000 in there for discussion purposes in case of emergency.
That's for 2009, and that can always be changed for future years. I have the mayor that's been waiting to speak.
The question's been answered. Thank you very much, for the clerk.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I have Councillor Maeve, sorry.
Just looking at the figure, if it's 452, and for the last 2 years we've set aside 250, does that mean we've got another 500,000 left over from the last 2 years we didn't spend?
In reserve?
Cumulative?
I would imagine that staff can answer.
The $250,000 allotment was a new item that was introduced in 2008 So there's really only 1 year. 2009 would be the second year, so there wouldn't be 500,000 as your.
The cushion from last year of 250, is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
So then we do another, yeah. Okay, great, thanks.
The $250,000 from 2008 has not been spent.
So is that in a reserve, and as I said, about the same as the CIP?
Sorry, go ahead.
Same as the CIP, is there money left over in that pot?
As we said, about the same discussion with the CIP, and as we talked about earlier, the 2008 year end is not closed yet. So it is a decision at the year end whether we would reserve that $250,000, so an increase in expenditure. If we're facing a situation where we're going to possibly be looking at a deficit, we certainly do not want to be reserving items that we didn't spend. Or I should say, we would come back to you with what the appropriate measures would be, but we certainly wouldn't want to be putting aside reserve funds for items that we may not spend.
Okay, while we're on that subject too, are there any other pots where there's leftover money from last year?
Well, as we indicated, we are looking at closing our financial statements. It is the 20th of January. We're not at, we haven't finished, we haven't received all our bills, so we're trying to work on closing that. We'll have a better indication by the end of January, and we're going to be coming back on February 23rd with any indication of areas that on our financial results. As Mr. Gulovic had indicated, we're not looking at a surplus. So we're not looking at an area where we would, as in other years, where we've had significant supplemental tax increases that would allow us to have surplus. So to answer your question, no, there's no other pools of money in coming out of the 2008 year that we can offset this year.
The 2008 year ends. We'll be back to council by February 23rd. Okay, I have Councillor Wing.
Yes, as a result of a surprise motion by Councillor Thompson in August, I ended up back on the Humane Society board in September, and I can reflect what the clerk said about how impressive the new board is and how wonderful the changes are going on there. And I remember when the Bandel report came in, we were seriously considering having the municipality assume animal control and sheltering operations in this municipality. I think I can safely say to you now that I really don't see that being necessary. I think, once the contract negotiations have concluded and new contracts in place for the Humane Society to continue to deliver both the control and sheltering services for us, that will be quite fine with that. It's not a grant, it's a contract, it's a fee for service, so I think we do need to allow room for increase. Particularly fuel goes up, they spend to have vehicles on the road, staff wages increase, they are under QP here at City Hall, so we do have to build in room for an increase, but no, I don't think we need to be setting money aside to hire our own staff and build our own shelter and start administering our own animal control.
Okay.
Yeah, take it all up, and we don't need
250. The motion on the floor then is to reduce the amount of monies paid to, well, I guess for the Humane Society by 250,000 for reserve. Thank you. By 250,000. Is there any other councillor that wishes to make a comment? For the motion, ready for the question? All those in
Reduce it how much?
250.
You're going to reduce it to just 200. Okay.
Councillor Wing.
Just to question that then, what if, the contract negotiations conclude with a somewhat higher amount than there was last year? Because there are increased costs. Gas prices are higher, staffing costs increase. What if we... I just want to know that if... And I'm not involved in these contract negotiations. I'm just saying there is negotiations going on. I want to make sure that the money will be there if what staff negotiates comes back at a higher level.
I think it's important to realize that what we are doing is not funding the Humane Society. We are contracting for animal services, animal control. So, that's what they asked for in the budget, so I think that's a fair and equitable way of doing it.
Correct. Mr. Arifida.
Big clarification, they haven't asked for that money. What happened was the old board made an annual request, which was for a fee for service, and we've paid that status quo with inflation over the last 2 years. There was some discussion back in 2006, 2007 that number was grossly underestimated. So we don't really, like I said initially, we really don't know what the appropriate quantum is for the contract. So to say that they've made a request based on past boards is inaccurate. So we're really not sure what that number is yet.
Councillor Thompson.
So through you, Mr. Chair, to the clerk, are you telling me they didn't make a request? So we got another 400,000 we can cut?
They didn't make a request. We didn't ask them to make a request because we felt that there would be negotiations, there would be
Is this an
services.
inflationary number? The one in the budget?
No.
Taken to, is it a...
452 is the same amount that was in the budget for 2008. There is no inflationary factor built in. So you're
I would include an inflationary factor out of the 250 and the balance be cut from the budget.
Perhaps then you would want, instead of cutting 250, you would amend that to 225.
That's fine.
I hear 215.
We'll get there.
Okay, so the motion is now changed so that the money allotted for animal control has been reduced by $225,000. Does every 225,000?
Yeah.
By that amount. It's at 702 right now. Does everyone understand the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Councillor Iannone, you're back in action?
Yeah, well, we've almost worked through all the low priorities, so I want to go to the last one I had marked here. Under administrative services, these pages aren't numbered. Under administrative services, it was other corporate management and support. It's under our priority exercise. And it's listed as a low priority, and there's a $1,715,000. What is that exactly?
I had the exact same question. I looked under tab 327 and I couldn't understand what it was.
And if staff thinks that's a low priority and we're down to 3.9, I have no problem cutting 1.7 for something staff doesn't really think we need. So can somebody explain that to us?
We're actually down to 3.643.
That's why you're the math teacher.
In that particular exercise, the priority setting, the way the weighting worked, it didn't facilitate some of the corporate expenses. This amount is a reserve that's set aside for a potential tax assessment appeal. And so while it doesn't score very high on your in the calculation of the priority, it is an important element because it is a reserve for a tax appeal.
Understood.
Gotcha.
Are there any other councillors? Councillor Thompson.
That's through you to the engineer again. Periodically, I hear that a municipality is giving back a roadway to the region. And when you think about this, it sounds like an insignificant matter, but when I hear some of the numbers from Fort Erie and Grimsby giving back roadways, and what happens, they go to the region, and as a result, we start funding those in other municipalities. Can you give us a brief look into what goes on with the exchange of roadways, and if other municipalities are giving up roadways and giving them to the region and saving a considerable amount of infrastructure and public works dollars at our expense? What should we be doing? Is there any roads that we're looking at? Certainly, I hope we're not assuming any, but are any that we are uploading to the region?
Through the chair, there is a long history on the whole issue with respect to roadways, and it's unfortunate that it's become very political in the past where the criteria was agreed to, and then they didn't like the results. And so you had a number of municipalities who are arguing that roads that didn't belong in the regional road network should stay in the regional road network. To that end, the region commissioned another study. Once again, results were published summer of 2008. Again, with this new criteria, and speaking about Niagara Falls only, they did identify some roads that should be uploaded at a certain time, and then roads that should be downloaded. And one of the roads that they talked about in particular is Bridge Street. When they complete the extension of Old Stone Road all the way to Victoria Avenue, that would become part of the new regional network, and in turn they would like to download Bridge Street to us. At the same time, they would pick up Victoria Avenue from Bridge Street to River Road as part of the regional network. They've also identified in the future that Mewburn Road from Mountain Road northerly towards Niagara Lake should become part of the regional network, but that's sometime in the future. And that's speaking to Niagara Falls only based on the new study that they've recently done.
How are we going to be financially? Is that equalized? Bridge Street has just been all reconstructed from Stanley down to Victoria.
When looking at the total kilometers, what they're proposing in the future, the city would have would see a reduction in their road network if they were to take when they take on Victoria Avenue and Newburgh Road. But it becomes a timing issue. I'd have to look at when the timing is. Look at that report in details. I just went by the map that they produced, what they felt should be downloaded and what should be uploaded.
Would this be a discussion of the council approval, or would this just be an engineering?
No, as in the past, when this was dealt with, I think it was back in the 90s, it came to this council for approval for roads that were uploaded and downloaded. It had to be, the council had to agree to it. Even though the region could download roads without our approval to us, it was done by agreement at that time.
And do it without our approval?
Yes, they can, just like the MTO did to them. But that's not been the past practice. The region has always talked to the area municipality, and it was done by agreement. That's how it was done last time, and that's my understanding of how it would be done in the future, that there would be an agreement with the group.
How have we fared in the past with respect to some of the other municipalities? I understand that one in Grimsby, which was substantial uploading to the region, and also in Fort Erie?
Yeah, I'd have to look in those ones specifically and look at did they meet.
Right, maybe you can let me know when you find out. Thank you.
Okay, council members, are there any other comments in regards to the priority exercise? Councillor Wayne.
Just to take a little different approach. I mean, you know, we've raised user fees, turned down grant requests and grant increase requests. We've chopped some things out. I'd like to look at the other side of the equation, which is the revenue generation. I think I asked for staff to come back with a report on this, but it came to my attention late last year that when we convert apartments or townhouses to condos, there's the effect of about a 50% tax reduction to the owner of those complexes. As soon as we convert them, the tax classification changes from multi-residential, which is at a higher rate, to residential, straight residential, which is at a lower rate. So even if somebody comes in and converts an apartment building, they can continue to own all the units, not sell a single one, but right away, almost 50% tax increase. So that's just one thing I wanted to note at this point. What I'm looking at here is tab 3 and subtab 20. It's the taxation payment in lieu. And you look at all of these, and there's community college, hospital, region, Niagara Falls, hydro. You know, there's a whole slew of them, and they're all at zero increase over last year. And I'm just wondering, you know, Niagara Parks is another one. There's federal properties. I'm just wondering, why is there no annual escalator built into these payment in lieu? You know, the cost of providing the services that these bodies enjoy increases for us every year, yet the amount of money that they pay us does not. Is there any way that we can seek to have an annual escalator to cover the increase, inflationary cost to have that built in?
Sure, I'll have Mr. Harrison answer that.
The majority of the properties that you are included in the PIL are rates that are prescribed by legislation. So they are not impacted by assessment increases, and they're really not impacted by anything that we can do per se. For instance, if you look at, well, an exception to that, of course, is the OLGC, which is prescribed by assessment, which does have an impact. The majority of these are based on the prescribed legislation.
Have these ever changed from year to year? Like, there's some, have some of these, say, been at the same rate since the 1970s?
Some of the legislation is quite old. Actually, we had this year in 2008, at the early part of the year, if you might recall, we talked about an increase in the PIL, the actual PIL that was a one-time item, and it had to do with the hydro canals and the transfer between hydroelectric, the dams and the hydro canals. There was a change in the allocation of the land, and because they were prescribed in a different manner, we saw an increase one time in 2008. However, going forward in 2009, those numbers will continue to run at the same amounts that we've historically seen.
Okay. I'm wondering, Mr. Chair, if it's possible for staff to bring in a report, just taking a look at whether or not we can, by resolution, ask the province to allow for some sort of annual escalator so that the increased costs that we incur providing those services are covered by the payment in lieu we receive, because they are enjoying the services we offer and really not keeping up with the rest of us in covering the costs of those. And the other thing, I don't know, did you want a motion for that?
For a report, yes.
Yes, okay, so that'll be my motion.
Motion by Councillor Wing, seconded by Councillor Ioannoni. Does everyone understand the motion? For a report to come back on the annualization of property in lieu payments. Okay, or payment in lieu properties. Okay, there is a motion on the floor for a report. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Councillor Wing.
And the other one is just the community college. Niagara College, there's absolutely nothing in there for them. And, you know, they still run the tourist industry development center out of there. They're still doing educational activities in there, and I just don't understand why we don't get any heads in beds. We don't get anything for, the majority of the premises are rented out, I think mostly to Niagara Parks right now, but to other things as well. And I just don't understand why we get absolutely nothing from Niagara College for the Dunn Street Maid of the Mist campus.
Luckily enough, Mr. Harrison has a comment for you again.
Niagara College pays heads and beds based on property that's owned by the college. They don't own any property here. That property is owned by Niagara Parks Commission, and even though they may or may not lease, we don't get any heads or beds on that property. That would be a property subject to the agreement that we have with the Niagara Parks Commission, and we receive the monies through that.
They sold it then to the parks?
Yes.
Okay.
Councillor Ioannoni.
Thanks. So I'm waiting for other people to slash, and I had a whole list. So let's now move to Parks and Rec, because we haven't touched Parks and Rec yet. When I go back onto staff's priorities, under Parks and Rec general purposes priority exercise, we have two in the top: cemetery services, tab 7.2 and tab 7.4, and there's 127,855 there for priorities that our staff has listed as low, and if they're not necessary right now, I'd like to see us not have to spend that 127. So if Denise could speak on it, I'd appreciate it.
Cemetery facility services and cemetery development.
Again, I think to echo what Mr. Harrison said is the points that were allotted were based on the categories. So based on that assessment, some of the areas and cemeteries may not get the highest ranking. For example, the facilities, which wouldn't have received points in certain categories, or where we house our administration staff in terms of customer service, and some of the other on-site buildings within the cemetery, if that is helpful in terms of determining how those priority pointing in terms of where they rolled out came from.
Councillor Ioannoni.
Thank you. You know what? We got to look at needs and wants, and at this point, I know people are dying to get in there, but I really don't think that that's something that we need to spend in 2009. So I'd like to make a motion to remove both those. And clearly, if we're getting a priority exercise where things are rated low, it's confusing to council when staff then stands up and says, well, it's rated low, but it's not really low. If it's low, it's low, and that's what came across in this document. And really, I think we can better spend $127,000 or not spend it at all.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor to remove those two funding requests from cemetery services. I'm just about to ask for it. Is there a seconder to the motion? I know. Let me see if there's a seconder. Is there a seconder to the motion? Seeing no seconder. Okay, then there is a seconder. Mr. Harrison.
Okay, the cemetery facilities, as is outlined in your booklet, and remember that the priority setting exercise has got to be combined with what's in your booklet. The cemetery facilities are the expenses like your hydro, your water, your natural gas. Those are the expenses and the facilities that we need to spend.
The office. The office.
I know exactly what you're going to say, and I agree. Then don't give it to us.
And don't give it to. And that's the third time we've heard that on a low priority. But cemetery development, like 84,006. Is that for hydro and a plot? Like, I'm not sure here, but.
Yeah, I have Mr. Harrison that will answer that way.
If you can turn to tab 4 in that area, section 7, you can see the items that have been identified.
Tab 7. Section 4.
Section 7, sub 4. You can see the items that are there. These are works that are planned to be done at the cemetery, and there is also a transfer for future uses to reserves for cemetery development.
It's clarified. I'll just add to that. It's clarified. There's cemetery development, for example. Each year we have to develop a portion of the cemetery. If we don't develop in this current year, for example, in section FV, those graves that would be available for sale in 2010 would not be available. So it's a pre-development investment to ensure that we have graves available at Fairview Cemetery in the following year. Again, because of the way the points were scored, that was indicated. We could defer that. It would just means that we will not have sales available in 2010 budget.
Councillor Thompson.
Yes, I think we've done fairly well tonight. If you go through the priorities, I think what we have to do is take our time and go through the book and establish. Otherwise, we could just make a motion. Everything that's a low priority, we cut out of the budget. I think we have to relate to what it really means. But I think we've done fairly well at this point, and we're not finished with the budget discussion. So I think rather than going through and picking out every low priority and having an explanation on it, the explanation is in the binder. So I would hope we would take the time to do that. Talking about cemetery services, I wonder if we could get an updated report. We had a suggestion about expanding Lundy's Lane Cemetery some time ago, and I don't know whether that's the $84,000 you have for development, but it doesn't appear that the restoration of the old schoolhouse there was, in fact, I believe it all changed in midstream, so maybe we could have an updated report on that so we could deal with that in the recommendation that was made by the staff at that time.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor already that deals with cemetery development. Withdraw the motion.
And I'm going to contact staff and maybe find out the scoring criteria for that, because if you're telling me it's not important, I'm cutting it.
Okay.
And I mean, clearly we need a little bit more explanation behind the non-importance.
I wouldn't necessarily disagree with you. If you look further down on the page, you'll see that you have Niagara Falls Arena concessions, Stanford Jack Bell concessions, and Chippewa concessions. They're all listed on there as expenditures, but I mean, in reading this, one would think that they lose $200,000, where that's not the case. So, Mr. Burden.
Through the chair, we'd like to just add some explanatory notes. Realize that the request that came to staff was following December the 15th. Dale and Todd put this exercise together basically over Christmas. And staff were asked to evaluate based on a set of 7 criteria. And we were only looking at expenditures, not the revenue side of the coin. What you're experiencing tonight is, and what you're experiencing really is the frustration of, can I really trust this document? This document is in its infancy. It's the best attempt within about 4 weeks over Christmas, and we really appreciate your handling of this document with caution, because as you're picking up, we have orange lines which in of themselves you have to pay the utility bills. So why doesn't it show as yellow or green? Well, it factors back to how the expenditures are being grouped by responsibility centers. We're trying to make this document, this binder, easy to use. The prioritization exercise is trying to address each of those responsibility centers. The priorities that we've chosen, even of themselves, are fraught with difficulty. Our directors discussed with great fervor how their rankings should measure up. And in fact, when we chose the 3 colors, our very concern was, do we even have low priorities? So we're very concerned that, as Councillor Thompson has pointed out, picking and choosing based on a color is not appropriate. We need you to look at each responsibility center when you see an orange or a yellow or a green, and not just sort of take it at face value, but do the homework. And we will do this exercise again next year, I'm sure, because you'll ask us to do it, and we'll have a much more refined approach. We appreciate your caution and your patience in this exercise.
Councillor Wayne.
I'd like to suggest one area in which another prioritization exercise might be in order. At the beginning of our budget binder, there's about 6 pages of conferences, conventions, and workshops that we're looking at sending people to this year. And I mean, they're piddly amounts in and of themselves, but together over the 6 pages, it totals over $100,000. And I'm just wondering if we can maybe do a bit of a prioritization and in the economic climate we're in, get that down under $100,000.
Okay, are there any other councillors then that wish to make a comment?
Is that a direction?
If you'd like to make it a motion.
Sure, I'll make a motion that staff be directed to shave the amounts allocated for 2009 conferences, conventions, workshops to a more reasonable figure.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor by Councillor Wing. Do I have a seconder to that motion?
What is reasonable?
She asked for the conferences amount to be reviewed by staff and come back with a more reasonable budget. Seconded by Councillor Carrier. I'm not quite sure if you'd like to define reasonable. Are you looking for a 50% reduction? Are you looking for an 80% reduction?
That's why I was suggesting a prioritization exercise. If there is something that it is very important for a member of staff to attend, then, you know, yeah, we can support that. But if it's something that's just sort of, you go every year and, you know, it's in somewhere in BC, like, you know, is that really, in this economic climate, something we should be doing?
Mm-hmm. To the motion?
Yes.
Okay. Councillor.
Yeah, I went over all of those, and, you know, first of all, any of the expenditures are not excessive, and I don't think there are too many even in the United States. Most of them are in Canada, and they are like the clerks' organizations, the solicitors, the fire chiefs, and these are conventions, and I don't think they were excessive, although it adds up to a substantial amount of money. But the council could set an example and cut out $7,000 for AMO if they wanted to really do something. Other than that, I don't think there's a lot in there. I think we're going to put the staff to a lot of trouble. These are organizations that they're directly connected with. They're not excessive, in my opinion.
Okay, well, staff will come back with a report. Councillor Maves, Councillor Ioannoni.
No, I have to agree with that. I think that a lot of these are educational, but they're not just conventions. A lot of times, I know that on Niagara Transit there were sales opportunities, and I think once Niagara Transit stopped going to some of these functions, I know we lost a big customer there, and I think that probably was part of the reason, was that we weren't staying in contact with some of these people. And as I say, I think some of them are very educational for staff. I know that we had to send mechanics at Niagara Transit to various places in the United States to learn how to use air conditioning facilities and how to properly do these things. And I think a lot of them are educational, and I don't think what we're spending is excessive. And I think possibly maybe we could break it down as to sales, education, and exactly what we're getting out of them. Maybe we can get a report in that fashion. But I think the $100,000 really isn't an awful lot for the size of the operation. But I think the thing is, too, if we can find one that's frivolous, we can eliminate that. But as I say, if it's a sales tool or an education tool, by all means, I'm for it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ioannoni.
No, I have definitely that. I would keep the same way.
Okay, if there's no other comments to the motion, then there's a motion on the floor for staff to come back with, I guess, a priority exercise in regards to staff conferences. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Councillor Thompson. Oh, I'm sorry. He's opposed. Are there any other councillors that wish to make a comment or a motion at this time? Sure. I'll just update council as to where we are right now. So far, we've used one-time funding of $3.9 million from the province. All the cuts that we've made so far have amounted to $1.347 million. If we are going to bridge the $8.8 million gap, then we have another $3.553 million to cut. So I know the comment was made that we've done a good job so far, but it's less than 1/3 of the way there. So I would not say so far that we've done a good job.
But we have the reserve fund from the sale of the property. Give us zero without any trouble.
I guess that's open to debate. I mean, I personally don't feel that plugging the hole really is going to solve the problem for future years. It doesn't really seem like sound financial planning to me to just spend all of our one-time reserves. Does sound like it. Are there any other councillors that wish to make a comment? Councillor Mace?
No, I'd just like to say, just looking at some of the figures, some of the increases are unavoidable, and I think that even if we do have to come in with an increase, it's going to be very modest. So I think if we keep working on this and with what we have in the reserves and whatnot, I think that probably a modest increase might be in order.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? If not, then I'll take that motion for adjournment by Councillor Diodati, seconded by Councillor Ioannoni. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. See you next week on January 26th.